Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new unit. Exciting. This unit is going to cover our Mesoamerican civilizations. We're finally going to make our way over to the Americas. We won't talk about North America that much. We will focus our attention on Central America and South America. We will cover three civilizations in Central and South America. We're going to meet the Aztecs, we're going to meet the Mayans, and we are going to meet the Inca people. Today, in these set of notes, we're going to introduce ourselves to why we started exploring outside of Europe, and we'll meet the Aztecs. Next video, we'll meet the Mayans and the Incas. And then the third and last video for this unit, we will unfortunately bring about the downfall of those civilizations. So let's figure out, why are we exploring? We're recovering from the Dark Ages. We are starting to not be so focused on merely surviving. We're focusing on looking outward now. Now that we have stability, protection, again, from the government, we're able to kind of, like I said, focus on something other than trying to basically survive. We're motivated to explore by what we call the three G's. The three words that begin with G. If you take other history classes, which you will as a student, you will hear these three G's again and again. Impress your teachers in the future by remembering them. Here are our three G's, our motivating factors for exploration. First is gold, right? There's that first G, gold. We are exploring because we want to find gold. We also use this to just describe looking for other valuable things, not necessarily physical gold. Some other things that were valuable that we were looking for: silver, spices, and other things that can just in general be sold. Tobacco becomes a big selling point. Sugar cane becomes a big selling point to make table sugar, as well as, unfortunately, people. Yikes. It's true though. Making money off of slave trades were motivating factors. So, like I said, gold can be actual physical gold, or it can just refer to, in general, money, looking for things that can be sold to make money. That's our first G. Our second G is God. Europe is very predominantly Christian at this point in time. Different branches of Christianity. Some countries were Catholic, some countries later form more Protestant. You got the Anglicans in England. That's a whole nother mess. But no matter what, they are all branches of Christianity. And one of their motivating factors is to spread their religion. They feel that they have a responsibility to these, quote unquote, savages throughout the world who are not yet Christians, and they want to spread Christianity so as to both gain power for their religion, but to also, again, quote unquote, save the lives of these savages who do not yet know of Christianity. Our third G of our three G's is glory, right? They simply want to become famous by exploring new places, discovering, quote unquote, discovering new things. They become famous, they become powerful. People know their names, people remember them. Their names get added to the history books. I'm teaching them. That's a big motivating factor. They want to be remembered, they want to be famous, they want to be well known, they want to gain power. And by sailing away into the dangerous unknown and conquering lands and performing all of these fantastic feats, that's how they do it. They can become famous, they can become powerful, and have themselves and their country remembered as influential and important. So these are our three G's: gold, God, and glory. You will have to know these. Hint, hint. Gold, God, and glory are three G's. We also start to explore for a couple of other reasons that don't fit into our three G's. Europe is starting to get crowded. The population is growing, and we need more and more resources and supplies to take care of people. Even things that we think are what we call renewable sources, right? Like trees, right? I can plant another tree and it will grow. But those take time. If I plant a small tree, if I go outside and plant an acorn in the ground, yeah, it's going to grow a tree, but it's going to take 20 years, 30, 40 years for it to grow into a decent sized tree that can supply wood for fires, homes, furniture. And so Europe is starting to use more resources than they're able to replenish. And we're running out of space. We have to look outside of Europe to meet those needs. Additionally, not only Europeans, but Muslims in the Middle East as well, we are much better sailors than we used to be. We have much more advanced sailing technology, navigation equipment. We're better able to explore and explore further than we had before with this new technology, both in shipbuilding and in navigation abilities, trying to figure out where we're going. All of these things influence us to start to explore more and farther than we had been before. Okay, the pretty much the first European country, at least, to start exploring is Portugal. Portugal is a very coastal country. It's on the Iberian Peninsula, right next to Spain, and so a lot of the border of Portugal is coastline, is bordered with water, and they are in general a pretty strong seafaring civilization. That means they're, as a people, they're usually just pretty good at building boats and navigating on the water, etc. So Portugal, it's no surprise to us that Portugal is one of our first countries to really start exploring outside of Europe. They also had a pretty influential leader. His name was Prince Henry, who's encouraged them to start exploring. He was fascinated with traveling on boats. He was fascinated with ships and water navigation and all kinds of stuff. He was just absolutely fascinated with it. And so he earns the little nickname Prince Henry the Navigator because of his fascination and his skill in those areas. As a result, our first kind of European settlements, but not in Europe, our first colonies are Portuguese trading towns all up and down the West African coast. That was the closest to Portugal. So let's look at our map here. Here's Prince Henry the Navigator. There he is, right? Gotta have that cross on my uniform, on my armor here, right? That's one of our 3Gs. God. All right, and then this is a Portuguese map of the coast of Africa. Obviously, they've named it something that is no longer appropriate, but this is a primary source Portuguese map, and you can see all of these little tiny, they look like tiny lines. These are actually names of Portuguese trading cities. That looks like a silly spelling of Mali. I know about Mali. One of our West African trade kingdoms, yes? And so all of these are, like I said, Portuguese trading towns. These are the names of Portuguese trading towns. And another interesting spelling for the word Atlantic. But anyway, this is our first step into starting to explore outside of Europe. Okay, eventually Europeans make it to what they call the New World, and what they're referring to this is the Americas. Now, the American continents were not empty. There was not really much new about them except for the fact that the Europeans didn't know they were there before. But they certainly were not empty. They were thriving, absolutely thriving, with very, very rich, culturally complex, and fascinating civilizations. Unfortunately, we're only going to learn about 3 of them, as I said in the beginning, the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Incas. But if this is a topic that interests you, I very strongly suggest that you use some of your free time to explore any more of these tribal civilizations in North and South and Central America prior to European colonization, because there are thousands and they are fascinating. And hopefully, as we cover these three, you'll be interested by that and want to learn more. I love these notes. These are probably one of my favorite notes. I think it might be my top number one favorite notes. As I said, Mayans and Incans are going to come in a later video. We are going to just going to cover the Aztecs. I don't want them to get too muddled up for you, so we're going to split them up here. Let's meet the Aztecs. The Aztec civilization is located in a central valley of Mexico. This area is what we call arid, A-R-I-D. It is arid, which means it doesn't get a lot of rain. Arid land is not necessarily a desert, but it just does not rain frequently. This makes farming difficult because plants, like humans, need water regularly. So if it's not raining a lot, you've got to find that water somewhere else. So to get food, the Aztecs built what they called chinampas. And these chinampas are basically like floating farms. The area that they were in, they actually settled on a lake, which is kind of interesting, on this kind of like marshy island lake thing. And so to continue to farm and grow food with the lack of rain, they kind of made this ingenious solution that they called chinampas to be able to feed all of the people of their empire. I think I have a little, yeah. This is a diagram of what we imagine these chinampas look like based off of primary sources. Now this is not a picture. These are like little Lego people. These are like plastic plants. Somebody's made like a little diorama. But a chinampa was a large, basically a floating farm. And so in the middle of the water, right in the middle of the lake, you can see, they set up these chinampas. They would plant trees at the corners and then at a few intervals along the sides, and the roots of the trees would hold into the ground, and that way the chinampa wouldn't just like float away down the lake. So that kept them in place, and they would fill the chinampa. It was kind of like a giant woven basket, and they would fill the chinampa with dirt, with soil and mud and nutrient-rich dirt, and they would plant on it. And the water would kind of soak gradually through the basket, through the soil, and there would be enough water in the soil and the dirt for the plants to absorb. And so that's how they got their water. That's how they did without having rain coming down. They just soaked up the water from the lake. And they would just travel on these little canoes from chinampas to chinampas. They would have, they probably didn't have too many ducks. They probably had more chickens more than anything else. But the chickens would just kind of roam around on the thing. They would throw them some seeds and stuff. And the chickens would help fertilize everything with their little chicken poops. And that's how they grew food. You can see we've got all kinds of, fake little plants here. And that's how they grew enough food in this arid climate. Absolutely fascinating. These are chinampas, our floating farms. The Aztec religion is also fascinating. It was a polytheistic religion, very similar to the other polytheistic religions we've learned about. Multiple gods ruling over different parts of nature, like the sun, the wind, etc. The leader of the Aztecs was also tied into their religion. The Aztecs were ruled by an emperor, but their emperor was seen as god-like. Their emperor was seen as somebody, like a physical representation of the gods, right? That's very similar to Egypt. Egypt did this as well. So led by a human, an emperor, but they saw this emperor as somebody who was, kind of a demigod. That means half god, half human. The most famous Aztec emperor was Montezuma. Montezuma is the one who was in charge at the time of the original Spanish incoming. This is what Montezuma looks like. This is a drawing we have of Montezuma. This is one of the more famous Aztec gods. This is Quetzalcoatl. And yes, he's a snake with feathers. And he is the god of war, if I remember correctly. Um, Kind of a threatening looking guy. This is obviously, again, a drawing. Here he is eating someone, which brings us to our next point about the Aztecs, if I remember correctly. Yeah, to appease the gods, the Aztecs had to perform sacrifices. These sacrifices could be animals, but they were very often humans. People like prisoners of war, right? So if the Aztecs had gone to war and captured some of the enemy soldiers, they would sacrifice them to the gods. They would sacrifice their own warriors to the gods. Or sometimes it was just average people. In fact, the Aztecs had a special ball game, probably believed to be the origin of soccer or football, if you call it football instead. It was played with a rubber ball, and there were rings, like a kind of like Harry Potter, right? Like they were rings, but they were up on the wall, and to get a point, you had to bounce the rubber ball through this hole. But the hole was like 12 feet off the ground. So it's kind of like basketball a little, but you couldn't use your hands, which kind of brings in the soccer component of it. Anyway, a really kind of interesting game. And this game was used to determine who the sacrifices would be, right? Logic, right? You would say, okay, you lose the game, you get sacrificed. Nope. The winning team of this game was sacrificed to the gods. That's true. Your next question, baby, why would you even want to play this game then, right? Like, I feel like you would want to lose the game. It was seen as an honor to be sacrificed to the gods. It's the gods. To give your life to appease the gods was very much so something that was honorable. And so, yeah, the winners of the games would sacrifice themselves, or well, not themselves, but they would become the sacrifices to the gods, which is kind of a crazy concept. Not a game that I don't think I would ever necessarily want to play. These sacrifices were often very bloody. Their kind of favorite method of sacrificing was to cut out the heart of somebody while they were alive and just kind of like hold this like literally still beating heart in your hand, and they would like drain blood, and it would just like come down off these temples, and it was just very, very bloody, as you can imagine human sacrifice might be. So kind of an intense religious ceremony we've got here with the Aztecs. The sacrifices took place on top of these pyramids. All right, we've definitely seen, different versions of pyramids throughout our class. Now, this isn't a fantastic picture. I couldn't find one that I really, really liked. So we'll have to use our imagination here. Now, I know it looks like these are the steps, right? You just walk right on up. No. These are the steps. These steps are humongous. These little people in the picture are normal-sized humans, so you can see just how large these giant steps are. Okay, those aren't the steps that you climb. You climb these. This is the stairway. There's usually a stairway on each side of the pyramid, so 4 stairways in total, believed to be 1 stairway for each season or each direction of the compass, north, east, south, and west. We've also found, and we think it's actually purposeful, most of the Aztec temples, there are 365 steps to the top. Now, if you remember, there are 365 days in a year. So it's kind of crazy. We think that they had a pretty decent grasp of, the year and the calendar, which is crazy considering how early the civilization was. But anyway, steps to the top, and then inside, it might have been open air, but usually it had this like a stone kind of covering. Inside this room would be the altar, and the sacrifice would take place in there, and then the blood, unfortunately, would just kind of like run down the sides. Yeah, If you travel to Mexico, we'll look at some other places. Guatemala also has quite a few, um, just a bunch of places in between there as well. You'll see ruins of these Aztec pyramids and such. If we were in school, we would have done a virtual reality in which we looked at these. I'm gonna try and see if I can't make that work. We'll figure it out. But hopefully you can visit some of these ruins, some of these pyramids someday and see just how large they are. The capital city for the Aztecs is Tenochtitlan, and it's actually today Mexico City. So if you've ever visited Mexico City, that city was built on top of the ancient Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Also, kind of interesting, the kind of origin of the location for Tenochtitlan. Aztecs believed that the gods spoke to them and said, "You're gonna find a new city." Their old city was called Aztlan. It sounds like Aslan from Narnia. And the god said, "Okay, you need to go to a new city now. You're gonna go and look for a new one, and when you find an eagle with a snake in its mouth sitting on a prickly pear cactus, that's where you need to build your city." And so the Aztecs were kind of roaming around, and finally they found a prickly pear cactus, and an eagle was sitting on it with a snake in his mouth. And that's where they built the city of Tenochtitlan, and that's today Mexico City. Now, if you know anything about Mexico, on their flag, we have a cactus with an eagle on it holding a snake. So they've kind of paid tribute to the Aztecs and the major empire of Mexico before the Spanish in their flag, which I think is really cool. So maybe you didn't know that, maybe you did, but now you do. If you ever see the Mexican flag, you can tell, oh, that's from the Aztecs. They were told to build their city there, and now it's Mexico City. So it's kind of cool. Something else you need to know about the Aztecs: they were very militaristic. That means they were very warlike, I guess is the best word for that. Hopefully you are recalling some things we learned in the past. We've learned about another civilization that was very militaristic, and that is Sparta, right? So you can compare what you know about Sparta to the Aztecs. The Aztecs were at war very often. They conquered many other civilizations and forced them to pay tribute, which is a form of taxes. And they definitely didn't have a lot of friends. This was something that the Spanish used to their advantage when they came to conquer the Americas. They went around to all of the neighboring tribes that had kind of grudges against the Aztecs or were enemies with the Aztecs. The Spanish were like, "Hey, we're going to try and take over these Aztecs. You want to help us?" And a lot of the tribes were like, "Yeah, we want to help you because those Aztecs suck. I don't like them." And so that was something, unfortunately, that helped bring down the Aztec Empire, was that the fact they had so many enemies. We won't end the Aztec Empire today. We'll wait a couple note videos later, 2 note videos later. But unfortunately, like the other civilizations, they do come to an end. We'll talk about the Mayans and the Incans in our next video. That's it for this one.